the Teach Pitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for Teach Pitch, a global community of tens of thousands of subscribers from over 205 countries who all have a desire to improve the state of education in this world. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of our subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, fashion designers, hospital builders, non-profit founders, authors, journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That is what we are going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo de Pap and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us in this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
The downside is that you can really get sucked into a very dark world and sometimes it's hard to get out again and see the light. So I've been struggling with that, especially also what you mentioned, the last documentary series about prostitution in 2019 was about child prostitution, also about the dark web. These communities are, there's millions of people there. There's not just a few creepy types doing their thing there. It's very big. It's very real. And that really, it destroyed a part of my heart. It really did, because what you see there and what is happening to children all over the world, it's devastating.
A very warm welcome to another episode of the Teach Pitch podcast. I'm very happy you could make it. My next guest is a well-known journalist in the Netherlands who throughout her career has done a lot of work, both in the written as well as in the spoken and visual press. I like her a lot, not only because she is very outspoken and has a very no-fuss approach to things, but also because she does not cave when things get challenging. Whether this is challenging in terms of getting backlash to the thought-provoking programs she makes, or it is because she is challenged because something is expected of her being a woman in a still male-dominated profession. We talk about my guest's decade-long journey as a TV presenter and a documentary maker, the many benefits of getting therapy, as well as her latest series called Jojanneke and the Jeugdzorgtapes, which freely translates means Jojanneke and the Child Care Tapes. And if you want to know more about this series, we have added a link in our show notes where you can actually view them. Please enjoy this interview, episode 48, Jojanneke van den Berge, the journalist.
This podcast is brought to you by Smartest, an app that uses artificial intelligence to let you create interactive quizzes for your class in a few seconds. Get started for free on app.smartest.io. We're so happy to be partnering with Hee Ha Ho, an interactive video platform that enables teachers and students to easily create amazing clickable videos for learning. Check out heehaho.com for more information and your free starter account. A big thank you to our friends at Zeus Maths Challenger, the only puzzle that effectively boosts your numeracy, critical thinking, and brain power. Go to czeusspuzzles.com to get your brain buzzing. We are so excited to be working with the team at Learning Ladders, the only platform that provides assessment that goes way beyond tracking to effectively support teaching and learning for EYFS primary and secondary settings. Go to learningladders.info to find out more.
Yes, and a very warm welcome to another episode of the Teach Pitch podcast. In the growth of the podcast, I've just been so fortunate to speak to so many fascinating people with fascinating professions from all over the world. And today is really no exception because I'm talking to a journalist, and I would almost say an investigative reporter from the Netherlands. Her name is Jojanneke van den Berge. Jojanneke, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Jojanneke, you might not know this, but I'm a big fan I've been living in the UK for over a decade now, but I've been following your career because we were also students together in the city of Utrecht. Full disclosure,
Yes.
and
I was
but
wondering if you were going to tell that. Yeah.
yeah. No, I am. But I have to say that ever since kind of we flew out of the city of Utrecht as students, you've been thriving as a journalist for the written press. I think that's where you started, and then
Yeah.
you made a switch to television. And then also, I've seen that you've been doing a variety of formats on television. So you're close to the news and what's happening in the world,
Yeah.
but you've also been doing more in-depth documentaries as well as maybe a slightly lighter format in the entertainment
Yeah.
also. Just to give people a little bit of a context, you're a career journalist. You've been going now for 15 years or something.
I think so. Maybe about almost 20 years. I started when I'm almost 42. So I think I started writing for the written press when I was 22, 23. So
Wow.
almost 20 years,
Yeah.
quite some
Yeah.
time.
And so your mind was set on becoming a journalist, right? Because you you
Yeah.
you studied. Is it journalism? Is that the
Well,
name of your
I
study?
studied mass communication science in Amsterdam, and I specialized in news and information. So that is kind of the scientific way you learn about journalism, but then also about all the thoughts and ideas behind it. So for me, it's always been a very good background to have. My
Mhm.
thesis was about how to keep young adults engaged with the news, which I think
Mhm.
is very important because you see, of course, they move away from the newspapers and the television news more and more. So I still
Mhm.
find that interesting in the work that I do today. So yeah, it still works for me.
Yeah, I think you raise a very interesting point there that the youth is moving away from the news and moving closer to, I think, social media, which they sometimes might misidentify as the news, um,
Yes,
and kind of all the dangers that come along with that, right? So that
absolutely.
basically everything needs to be soundbited and kind of be summarized to 140 characters. It needs to be quick, 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 quick.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that as well in kind of your profession, in how you make, for instance, your documentaries?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, you see
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's a huge difference with 10 years ago. You see that everything, as you mentioned, it has to be shorter, sharper, quicker to keep the attention. I think that on one hand, that's a normal evaluation, but it's also dangerous, and that's why I really think it's important because I'm making documentary series, for instance, that you can take the time to explain stories, to tell stories, to show the audience what is going on, and that it's still possible to take like 45 minutes for an episode to really show what is happening in the world. And especially with all the fake news rising at this moment and people getting disoriented and spiraling down sometimes in these stories that are not real, but to them they are very real, and
Mhm.
that is the world to them. So
Mhm.
that is a very important job for us as journalists to keep trying and
Yeah.
fighting to keep sending out those stories into the world. And
Yeah.
I think journalism is also endangered at this moment because of this, because of the fake news, because of the many politicians judging the press, saying it's not real, saying it's not fair. It's very dangerous. Yeah, for us as journalists, it's very important these days to keep fighting and show them wrong and to keep
Yeah.
the audience with us.
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind as a response to what you just said. One of the things is indeed, and I think we saw that very in an inflamed way when Donald Trump was president, about calling out the New York Times and kind of big media as fake news and whatever more. I always figured that the journalists who are bringing the news, they need to have a very good moral compass, and they kind of their sense of idealism and their sense of sticking to their guns needs to be very firm. Do you recognize that?
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes it's also hard to do so because
Yeah.
you have to, of course, as a journalist, you have to be objective
Yeah.
double check all your facts. But I also think, and I am one of those journalists who also thinks that it's important for a journalist to acknowledge and also explain to the audience that pure objectivity, it's not possible because we're all human. Every
Yeah.
journalist is a human being. The
Hmm.
letters in the newspaper, they don't fall down from the sky onto the paper. They go through people's minds, through people's hearts, and through people's hands. That does not mean that they are not true and not real, but a journalist is always taking with him or her a piece of who he or she is. So that we also have to be honest about. And I think it's also important that when a journalist, I think when you really want to become a good journalist, you also have to dare to work from the heart and from what you think is important and from what touches you and what hurts you, and from that feelings, the best and most beautiful stories arise. But that does not mean that. So that's a very thin line. Do you understand what I'm saying? So journalists, they work to produce stories that are real and true, but they
Yeah.
also work from their heart and feeling,
Yeah.
and that should not go away because of that,
Yeah.
because of we're scared that of the stamp that we're getting, that it's all fake news and it's not
Yeah.
good. And I get that a lot. I had an interview. I worked as a news anchor for Eén Vandaag. That's a big Dutch national news program. And I interviewed Geert Wilders. He's a right-wing politician. And I had some very critical questions for him because at the time he said that it was safe for all refugees from Syria to just go back to their country, when that obviously was not the case. So I questioned him, and I questioned him very critically about that. And then what you get is that you get a lot of, I got so much, it's always the case when you interview politicians like that. You always get so much hate and so much criticism, saying, oh, you are a left-wing journalist, or your ideas are so and so. But no, you're just interviewing a politician in a critical way. But in these days, it's all so sensitive, and as a journalist, it's very hard to find your way in that. But I would never choose to do it differently, because I stand for these questions. I stand for the fact that we have to interview politicians in a critical way. And those are very difficult challenges to deal with as a journalist today.
Yeah, I mean, I think also there's a distinction between the method, because when we say fake news, we actually, or alternative facts, we actually refer to, okay, this interview or this article is based on made up data. So things that have never happened, or numbers that are just not correct, or whatever. Or I think most importantly, fact finding. So kind of, what are your sources to make a specific claim? So from where I stand, as a non-journalist, but from where I stand, I think regardless of your personal preference, I think your fact-finding method needs to be solid, and it basically shouldn't be colored, right? It shouldn't be right-wing colored or left-wing colored. It should just be kind of an objectively verified method that we can all agree on, because otherwise, what are we doing, right? And I think that's sometimes lost, because then,
Yeah,
that's
I think,
my opinion.
lost in what way? What do you mean?
I think there are proven methods that, for instance, let's take the New York Times, for example. I think journalists there, they have a proven method before they publish an article, that they need to get their fact finding straight and their source finding, right? And then, yes, the part whereby the specific journalist has a specific preference or opinion, that's okay, because if that is also expressed in the article, then we're fine. I mean, I think we're all intelligent enough to distinguish one thing from the other. But what I don't think you can do is, you cannot come up with a source, or you cannot kind of fake a statistic, or bring data in that is not real. And I think this is where we are sometimes getting lost, because I think with people attacking the news, or kind of reliable news sources, or news sources that have been there for a longer period of time, people say, well, the fact-finding strategy is defunct. It doesn't work, and therefore we have every right to kind of question the integrity of the journalist.
Yes, well, that is
And
absolutely not
yeah,
the case, of course, because
yeah, yeah,
as you were saying, the journalists and media institutions, the old ones, the ones that have been there for a long time, the serious ones, they work in a very serious manner, checking their
yeah,
facts, working with scientists or known institutions. But the problem is that those scientists that the journalists turn to, or the institutions that have been around for a long time, they are now questioned by the people who say it's all fake news. It's all,
yeah,
everything. You can just shove away everything by saying it's fake or it's not, and it's not,
yeah,
authentic. And that is the scary part of our
yeah,
work today. So that
yeah,
that is hard. It's a
yeah.
fight.
It's a fight, but I'm happy you're on the forefront there fighting, and I think it's a nice segue into your first challenge, Jojanneke, because just like any other guest, you've ahead of this interview, you sent us 3 challenges, and thank you very much for doing an in-depth job on defining them. And it's actually already a little bit of what we've been talking about, because it is about resistance. It's about the backlash that you can receive when you stick to your guns. Now, the challenge that you described was when you, as a reporter, made a documentary about prostitution in the Netherlands, and
Yes.
there was a big response to the documentary. Can you tell me a little bit about the response and
Yeah.
the feedback
Yes.
you
This
received?
this this documentary, it came out in 2015. So that is 7 years ago, and the Netherlands, they have always been very proud of their red light district, of the way they handle prostitution in our country. We are world famous for it, and we also think that it shows how liberated we are, and free spirited and open minded we are. Um, which has always been very conflicting to me, because in prostitution there is a lot of misery and forced prostitution. A lot of people suffer deeply in prostitution, also behind the windows at the red light district. So that was the reason for me to make this documentary series about it, to dive in the world and also show what else is going on behind those happy faces, behind the red light windows. But I did not, it was my first documentary series, and I was not prepared. Of course, I was prepared for reactions and for people to think something about the series. But the backlash, it was so big, also because there was back in those days a very strong pro prostitution lobby. And it knocked me off my feet. I was not prepared for it. And it was the first time that I encountered what it was like when you come out with a message, with stories that are uncomfortable, and people don't like it, because a lot of money is being made in this world not by the women or men, most of the time, who are the sex workers, but the people around it, the pimps, the people who rent the rooms. And also there are a lot of people who go to prostitutes and pay for them. So there was a very, very big backlash, and it really touched me, and it affected me for some time. So that was for me the first time that I saw, also because I am a woman, a woman reporter. I think that women in journalism, they even receive more, or women in politics or in media or wherever. If you're a woman and you go out there and you tell your message, you're criticized stronger than a man. And it's often also about other things than your subject. It can be about the way you look, or your hair, or the clothes you wear, or whatever. So that was my first encounter with that, and for some time it took me away from telling those stories. So I made this documentary. It was successful, because there was a lot of happening in politics, and there was a lot of debate about it and discussion. So that's what you want when you're a journalist, of course. But I decided okay, I'm going to move away from, really diving into painful stories and getting them out there. So I was asked to work at the news show Eén Vandaag, and I became an anchor there, and I worked a couple of years there, and it was very nice, because of course also you have an important job, and you get the news out there, but it wasn't necessarily my stories. It weren't my stories. It was not my news that I was bringing out there, I was, handling it in a different way. And for a few years, that was very nice and very learnful. But in my heart, I felt that I was missing the work I did before that. To take those stories that get to you, that get to your heart, and you're getting angry about, and you feel deeply about. And so eventually I turned back to it, and I'm very happy about it. But looking back, I also think, wow, it's such a shame, and that I held myself back because of,
The backlash.
of the backlash I encountered. And of
Yeah.
course, in these days with social media, I mean, it's getting worse and worse. And I all the women journalists I know, they get like, threatened with rape or death, or, one the most terrible things. And it's become normal. It's not normal, but it's become normal these days that when you are, especially a woman journalist or advocate, you can count on a lot of hate and the terrible stuff coming thrown at you. And that's, of course, a terrible thing, but it is the reality, and you have to learn how to handle it.
First of all, I'm so sorry you had to go through this, for exposing certain truths, because I think that's what you've been doing with your documentary. You're showing another side to a business which is presented, as you said in the beginning, as very shiny, and it's all, everyone's happy, and you basically exposed, well, that's not the case. But then that backlash in terms of threats and kind of all these horrible things, that's really not not what you should expect, or I don't think it's fair on you. And my other response would be, I only think it's very normal that in the first instance you don't know how to deal with it. I wouldn't know how to deal with it either. So it's only very normal that you say, well, hold on, what's happening here? So that you take two steps back. Now, you said you're back into making documentaries, similar to how you did it in the beginning. How do you cope with it now? So what's your coping mechanism?
Yeah, well, of course, I learned a few things. I don't read everything anymore. I don't respond to everything anymore, because what you see and what you read, you cannot unread it. You cannot unsee it. You cannot unfeel it. I still remember I will not repeat it here, but some terrible message I got on Facebook when that first documentary came out. And I still feel that. I still can feel the hurt and how appalled I was by it, and how deeply it touched me. So I learned that I don't read everything. I don't see everything. Of course, I try to. It does not mean that I don't respond to people when people reach out to me, and they do it respectfully, and they want to, but they think about matters in a different way. That's fine. We can have a discussion about that. I always react to those people. But when I just read the first words and I think, oh, this is going a very wrong way, I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to respond to it. So that's an important thing that I learned. I also, I got older. I'm 7 years older now, and so I can maybe take a little bit more distance of what other people think of you. But it's still, it can be hard. It's still fearful sometimes when I chose to again dive into the world of prostitution in 2019. So that was 4 years after, and I just said to myself, well, there's still a lot of shit going on. I'm not gonna look away anymore. I'm gonna dive in again, and I'll just see what happens. And that series was more about child prostitution in the Netherlands, which happens also in the Netherlands, like it happens in every country. But there was less backlash about that, because almost everybody hates child prostitution, of course. But I was able to handle it in a different way. I said to myself beforehand, you're going to do this. This is what you stand for. This is what you feel for. You're just going to do it. But you have to learn this. So that's, I think, for people, for journalists, for young journalists, it's an important thing that, realize that you will get backlash, but don't let it get to you too much, and just be careful about what you do and don't read. There's so much hatred going on the social media. It's really not all that important. It really, because I see that for some people, I chose to come back. I chose to get back to the documentary television making and still touch these subjects. But there are also a lot of people, a lot of women, especially girls, who don't come back, who let
Yeah.
themselves, get scared away. And I
Be
think that's
intimidated.
very intimidating. This is a
Yeah.
very bad thing.
Yeah.
So I think there should be more, we should be more aware of that is going on. I mean,
Yeah.
women and girls are less visible in our world, in all branches, also in journalism, also in reporting, in media, in politics. And it's a real thing. I call it, there's a Dutch writer, Susan Smith, and she calls it pyre fear.
Mhm.
It's a word that comes from the witch hunting, where in fact it was women hunting back in the days. Women who were outspoken, who had ideas, who were fierce women. They were, well, we all know it. They were prosecuted, and a lot of them ended up on the pyre,
Mhm.
the brandstapel, we call it in
Yeah.
Holland. And that fear of to speak yourself, to speak out, to tell what you think, it's still a problem for women. I still experience it also when I go on, to talk on a talk show about my programs. I'm always thinking, okay, am I not too fierce? Am I not too hard? Am I not too this or that? Or
Yeah.
it's a thing you have to think about as a woman. And I hope that will change in the future.
Yeah.
But to be aware about this will help that change. And I just want to
Yeah.
call out to all the young women: go out there, don't don't let them hold you back, because you've
Yeah.
got a story to tell and you should tell it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jojanneke. That's really wonderfully, beautifully formulated. I just want to one small step back, whereby you say a woman cannot be fierce or cannot be hard in her message. That's a deterrent.
Yeah,
Um, could you give me an example of where I don't know if it happened to you, but or maybe someone else, whereby you felt, okay, now it's too hard, so so the message doesn't come across.
yeah. Well, it's often the case. I've experienced it as an anchor when I was a news anchor. When you're a man, it's fine. You can you can be critical and hard and really go into it with in an interview with a politician or whoever. But when you're a woman, you looked at it in a different way, because people
Mhm.
expect from women that they are soft and friendly, for a nice atmosphere. That's what people
Mhm.
still expect from girls and from women. And I've
Yeah.
encountered in my work as an anchor also that I got, from viewers who were saying, "Oh, you were very harsh on him," or you're such a bitch, or you're can't you smile more a little bit,
Oh
like
wow.
things like
Yeah.
that. And a man would never get
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
those messages. So but you have to keep that in mind. And I do it because I know it's important. So when I have an interview with like an important politician in one of my television series, I always make sure that I'm critical, but I also have a friendly face, or a slight smile, or
Yeah.
and it's okay. I do it because I know my message will come through in a better way. But at some points, it's of course kind of crazy that
No,
I
it's
that I have to
ludicrous.
think
Yeah, I
about it.
mean,
Yeah,
I know. I mean, good for you. You play the game because you're focused on getting the interview out and getting results. But if you think about it, I think you're very right. They're putting you in a news program, and then there's an anchor. I don't know, but there might also be a male anchor, and you're the
of
female
course. Yeah,
anchor. So they're
yeah,
looking for a balance. So you need to be the smiling, pretty one,
yeah,
and the anchor needs to be something else. So they're looking for that balance, but you all the time are given that role, whereas that's not what the news is about, right?
right.
And I feel your frustration that why do I need to ask my questions differently, or why do I need to smile more, or
Yeah,
whatever it is you need to do, whereas a man can
yes.
get away with practically anything. So
Yes,
yeah.
that's so true. Yeah, and also when you look at the anchors, it's a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, there's always the older, wiser anchor next to the younger, uh, pretty woman, or nice looking girl.
Yeah.
It's also a crazy thing. I mean, in the Netherlands, you can be ugly and be a very successful male journalist or anchor. That's not possible for a woman. You cannot
Mm.
be a fat, not good looking woman and be a very
Yeah.
successful anchor or presenter on television. I think that is
Yeah.
crazy, but it's still the way we look at men and women, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sad, but I hope that with time this will progress and will
Well, I say ugly.
disappear. Yeah.
I don't want to say ugly because people are not ugly, but you know what I mean. You have to. There are men on television that are, well, mediocre looking or
Mm.
have some more weight on them, and that would never be the case for a woman
Yeah.
presenter or
Yeah.
anchor. And I think that's a shame. Or an
Yeah.
older woman. They're all young, like
Yeah.
on television, older women, they don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we can go on for hours about this specific topic, and
Yes.
thank you for highlighting this. But we have yet another challenge to
Yeah.
work ourselves through, which is, yeah. I mean, I think that, and this is what when I opened and kind of introduced your career, there's a kind of a balance or a journey almost from light touch programs, which are slightly more entertaining, to very deep documentaries about very profound issues. And it almost begs the question, which one do you prefer? I think I know the answer, but let me just ask it. which what do you prefer? Which of the two? Which of the
Yeah,
two
yeah,
formats?
yeah. No, I've always preferred
Mhm.
the work where it's about something, it's about,
Yeah,
well, journalism is always about something. So I've always
yeah,
preferred the work where there's a journalist core in it. I
yeah,
started working for the written press for serious magazines and the newspaper. And then I just got into television. I kind of rolled into it. And also, and that gets back a little bit about the topic we were talking about before, because I was a young woman and they liked the way I looked. I was quickly also asked for, programs that get a very big audience and are more
mm,
about entertainment. And
mm,
I said yes to a couple of them because I wanted to learn and I wanted to have a look.
mm,
And I could maybe have an old career just staying on that path. And I had a lot of fun also doing those programs. But in the end, I really missed the depth and the topics that are close to my heart, or just the news and what's going on in the world. That is what matters to me. That's why I became a journalist. So I missed
yeah,
that in those programs. So I
yeah,
moved away from them, which meant that it makes less money, of course, to make a documentary series than you do when you work for a commercial network and present entertainment shows, which was
yeah,
very much fun to do. But in the end, and I think that's very important, you have to listen to your heart and
yeah,
what drives you, what really drives you, and what inspires you. And that also is the feeling that made me go back to the documentary making and the television making. And I'm still glad about it every day that I made that choice, because
yeah,
this is my passion. This is what
yeah.
gets me going. And yeah, but it
And
can be
you,
a hard decision, of course. Yeah.
yeah, no. Well, first of all, I'm very happy you made the decision, because you're making now very profound, beautiful, touching documentaries about issues that matter. So I'm very happy you made that decision. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that, of course, you were developing a name and a brand as a journalist. I think in the Netherlands right now, if you
Yes.
push out such a documentary, people recognize you, they know who you are, and I think that's important to give attention to those matters. If you were just a journalist just starting off, then it might not have been able to carry your name, because people would
Absolutely.
wonder who's
Absolutely.
Jojanneke, right? Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes you just
yeah,
have to take a dive into something or take a plunge and do something and maybe regret it after, 2 years and say, okay, this was not my thing. But you
yeah,
always learn something from it. You
yeah,
always take something with you. And as you say, as a journalist, it's also important to make a name for yourself and to,
yeah,
get yourself out there. And sometimes you,
yeah,
you go left and you go right. And that's how you try to do it. Yeah. But
yeah.
always stay close to
to
your
yourself.
intuition and
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, I think this also very much leads into the second challenge, Jojanneke, because you basically say, okay, I chose to go for topics that matter, but then the topics that you selected are, of a very heavy nature, right? Where you already mentioned prostitution, but you also looked at things like the dark web, and now your most recent documentary is called the Child Care Tapes, which exposes all the atrocities and all things that go wrong in children whose care is given over to the government and
Yeah.
foster programs and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And as your challenge, you basically say, well, the topics are very heavy, and you have a deep doses of empathy, but as a challenge you define, and I hope I say that correctly, that it's sometimes difficult for you to draw the line, right?
Yeah.
That not to get too involved.
Yes. Yes. And that is on the other side also the way I want to work, because if you don't,
Yeah.
get involved or get touched by the people you work with, I could not make the programs the way I want to make them. But the downside is that you can really get sucked into a very dark world, and sometimes it's hard to get out again and see the light. So I've been struggling with that, especially also what you mentioned, the last documentary series about prostitution in 2019 was about child prostitution, also about the dark web. A lot of prostitution is going on online and also on the dark web. These communities are, there's millions of people there. There's not just a few creepy types, doing their thing there. It's very big. It's very real. And that really touched me because I was looking with investigators, into those networks and reading and seeing what is going on there. And that really, well, it destroyed a part of my heart. It really did, because what you see there and what you read there and what is happening to children all over the world, it's devastating. It's devastating. And I still haven't recovered from it. And I probably will never really recover from what I saw there. Because sometimes you just want to think, oh, the world it's so terrible. Let's just stop everybody. Let's just, let's just throw a big nuclear bomb on it and let it all go away. Because when you see what people are doing to children or other people, sometimes it's just so bad and so terrible that you cannot see the light anymore. But on the other hand, I also said to myself, okay, if you want to keep on doing this work, I don't want to look away from what is going on in the world. I don't want to, let it pass me by so that I can have a nice life. So you have to find a way to deal with it. And I got better at that. I still get involved. I still put my heart out there. I still connect with the people and the children I work with. But I also, try to care for them, but not suffer with them, if you know what I mean. So, and that has helped me to keep on doing my work. As you were saying, there's a television program, documentary series broadcasting about the child care system or the foster system, and the government is taking care of them. And there's a lot of things not going right in the Netherlands with these children. They are suffering. They are, experiencing abuse. And most of the time when they get out of the system, they're worse than they were when they get into the system. And there are a lot of, stories that touched me. I was one of the girls who was in my series. She's not with us anymore because she was euthanized because of her mental problems, and a big part of those problems were caused by the system, by the government system she was in for all those years. And it was devastating. But on the other hand, I also got so much from her strength and her will to tell her story before she died. And it was really important for her to get her story out there before her life ended, because it was her way to help the children who are next, who will get into the system, and so that they will suffer less than she did. And that was such a powerful thing. So at the one hand, it was very sad that her life, and she was only 28, that her life had to end, that she could not live anymore because she was so wounded in our system, in our rich country, the Netherlands. But I chose to focus on her strength and on her love for these other children, and that gave me a lot. So that is the way I try to work now. I try to focus
Yeah.
on the light in the sadness,
Yeah.
when it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, these are very, as we said before, very heavy topics. So it's very difficult not to take it home with you. So I do appreciate you need to find certain coping mechanisms for yourself to basically say, okay, that was work. I'm now going to, because you have three lovely children, I'm now going to
Yeah.
be at home with my children.
Yeah.
And these are difficult things because, you also started the interview saying we're all human beings. So we cannot help but feeling for each other, right? Or
Yeah.
empathizing with each other's situation. And I don't think there's ever going to be like oh, no, this doesn't hurt me at all, because that most likely will also affect the beauty of what you put out there, because
Yeah.
it needs to be made with a certain perspective or a certain soul almost, because otherwise, what's the point? You
Yes.
cannot just, yeah.
And that's also very
Yeah.
important to me, and something I had to learn also through the years is that I can be myself. When you're a journalist or you make a television program, you present yourself. You think you have to present yourself in a certain way and act in a certain way. And I learned through the years that it's so much better, and you connect so much better to people, whether it's a politician or a child prostitute, when you are just being yourself. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's often not. I mean, how often are we really ourselves? It's hard for people to be who you are. It's scary
Yeah.
sometimes, and especially
Yeah.
when you're doing your job. But I really learned that just to be grounded and to speak from, of course I have questions in my head, but I always just try to work from the heart. And that's a very important lesson that it took me quite some time to learn, but I think my work has gotten better because of it. The more
Yeah.
I can be me, the better the journalistic work that I do can be. So I think
Yeah.
it's also very important.
Yeah. I really like what you said about I refuse to be a bystander, right? I refuse to basically say, I'm just going to pretend this is all not here, right? I really like that. It's like, let's accept the world with all its ugliness, and let's have a look and see what we can expose with the outcome to potentially make it a little better. And that you basically say, well, even if this is difficult or even if this is heavy, it still needs to be done. So kudos to you for doing that. And I don't think too many people choose to do that, but you do. So
Yes, and
my hat's off to you. Yeah.
if I can just say one more thing about it, because we were talking about this, and then I think about all the young people, and of course what you see on Instagram and social media. There's a tendency towards the external and the way we look, or if you're beautiful or not. The external matters, and
Yeah.
especially for young women, it's a go-to. If you want
Yeah.
to get a lot of followers, or if you want to get your name out there, there's this idea that it's all about your appearance, the way you look. There's a lot of focus on that, and I would like to invite young people, young women, to look beyond that. Your worth is more than the way you look. You also have the right to have thoughts, to have feelings about things that are going on in the world, and you can dive into it, and you have a right to get it out there. It's just not have to be all about your appearance and the external.
Yeah.
I hope that will change a little bit in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, what I always say about social media, first and foremost, which I think is the biggest instigator for people to think like that, is it really cultivates herd behavior. I think we create the expectation like, here's what it needs to look like, or here how it needs to be for it to
Yes.
be accepted and for it to be successful, and successful then being likes or shares or whatever it is, kind of, it's all in that world. But we forget that is not a real world. Right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's a mosaic. It's a window to what you would like your world to be. It's not even your real world. It's just
No.
like a snippet of something like, okay, I look nice on this picture, or I had some good light here, or something
Yeah.
that allows you to share it, and that creates some love in this social media world. But it is very far from reality or from the real world. And
Yes.
I you know, and that's what we should think about. Um, and also the other side is that you never see people posting like, oh my god, I've got diarrhea today, or I've got, you know, very my belly ache. Is like, we never share the horrible truths about our life on social media. That's not, you know, maybe sometimes if people want to ask, you know, if they're an ambassador for rare disease, it's starting to begin. But I think
Yeah.
that's a better use of social media, that if you're
Yeah.
going to ask for attention, then ask for attention for things that matter, right? I
Yeah.
don't go pout with a selfie and think that that's the answer to all your problems, because it isn't, and it isn't the
Yeah.
real world. But again, I'm also 43, so you know,
You're very old.
grandpa speaks. Yeah, I'm old, so so who should listen to me? Anyways, that's my 5 cents. Moving on to your third challenge, and Jojanneke, thank you so much for being so open with us here today. Is you talk about the role of therapy in your life, and I think justifiably so. You've you know, as a journalist, and specifically a journalist, you know, who chooses to make such beautiful, profound documentaries. You say that therapy has saved you to a certain level, that it really helps you to better cope with everything. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I tried a lot of things to cope with, um, the things I took with me from the work that I did, and I still do. So therapy is not the only way. I also, I still go to this energy man who does energy work on me, and I go to meditation teachings and yoga and all of that. So I think you should always look for the way, or you can find it in soccer or whatever sports. You should always look for the ways that that light your being. But I think, and I'm a real fan of therapy, because, well, first of all, it really helped me with issues I had as a human being, but also with issues I encountered in my work. And although it's being talked about more and more these days, and it's not that a big of a taboo that it used to be, I still feel that it can be shameful for people to talk about it, or to say, I'm seeing a psychiatrist, or I'm in therapy. And I think everybody should go and have therapy. I mean, I think
Mhm.
it would be so good for all people. We all encounter, difficulties in our lives, in our jobs, in our relationships with our kids. And I know that the therapy, I was in therapy for, I think 3.5 years. I went twice a week. So it was a big investment, but I'm still so grateful that I did it, and I still
Mhm.
take away so much from it today in my work and in my life also, and in my in the encounters that I have with other people. But I was also when I had the therapy, it was maybe 15 years ago, so it's quite a while ago. And back then it was, I didn't mention it to everybody. I couldn't speak
Mhm.
freely about it because I was scared what people might think. I was already working as a journalist, and that's kind of sad, why.
Mhm.
It would have been great to talk about it with other people, what I was going
Mhm.
through and what I was learning from it. And yeah, so nowadays I think it could help if we just be honest about it. And of course you have the whole coaching scene, and there's a lot of coaching this and coaching that, and that feels like a safer word to use. And of course there are some wonderful coaches out there, but I mean, the path I went through in my therapy, I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And
Yeah.
I would just say, if you, well, as I said, I could recommend it to everybody. Everybody could use therapy and just look at themselves and learn and be more connected to yourself, and to reflect on yourself. It's a tool that will get you a long way in the rest
Yeah.
of your life. And also in our job, in our working field, and in journalism and media, we encounter a lot of, you know, yeah, hard stories, hard news. And it's okay if you need some help to cope with that and
Yeah.
to learn how to deal with that. And so yay for therapy.
No, yay for therapy,
Yeah.
and I'm also an advocate for it. And I'll do you one more. I also had therapy, and not so long ago. And what got me into it was actually reading a book. And the book that I read is a book by Philippa Perry. I don't know
Oh
if you know it, but
yes,
it's about
yes.
parenting. It's about the book you wish your parents would have read.
Hmm.
And
Beautiful book.
it's a beautiful book, and there's just one chapter in the book that describes a scenario about parents hitting blind spots, and they don't know they're hitting a blind spot. So, for instance, Philippa Perry describes a scenario whereby the parent is jealous of the child, but it doesn't want to be jealous of the child, nor does it know that it is jealous of the child. So it's
Mm.
a situation whereby a father coming who came from a broken family, he never had a father, and now he's father to a small child, and he basically says like everything's fine and I'm so happy to be a dad, but doesn't give the child enough attention because he somewhere in his system he thinks, I coped without a dad, so my son should as well. So I shouldn't be present all the time or something like that. So he
Yeah.
doesn't mean to be. It's not a conscious process, but he still does it. So in the execution of his fatherhood, that's kind of very much present. And I also came from a fragmented family. I have my father and my mother in my life, but they were divorced when I was 3, and kind of loads of stories. And I said, oh, there might be a blind spot for me as well that I do not know
Mm.
of, and I cannot identify it myself, nor would I want to ask my wife to identify that for me, because that's not the role of your partner. You shouldn't burden your partner with such a thing, right? So I underwent therapy to basically see, like, you know, relive that again, relive your childhood again. Talk to me about this, and it did me a lot of good, and I can highly recommend it. And it wasn't because anything was wrong or anything was, but it really for me was like, okay, are there any blind spots, are there any things that I should be aware of, because if not I will pass it on, and that would be the biggest tragedy. I don't want my frustration or blindness or bitterness to be passed on to the next generation. I do not want to give my daughter that, right? I want to,
Yeah.
it should end with me.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's on a
that was
tangent.
also
That's my story, but yeah.
yes, that's
Yeah.
beautiful that you mentioned that, because it was for me it was also a very important reason to go into therapy. I didn't want to pass it. I did not have children at the time, but I didn't want to
Yeah.
pass my issues on to them. And
Yeah.
as I said, it was some time ago for me, but at times I have gone back to it. So I've gone back to therapy when I notice, oh, I need a freshen up, or I need
Yeah.
some extra attention. I went back to it for a shorter time, but it really helped me. Every time it helps me so much. So
Yeah.
it's okay. It doesn't mean that once you have been in therapy, then you're this whole perfect person. And it's no, of course, you after 10 years, you think, okay, I need to focus a little bit more on this, and then I just go back and or I have this issue that I want to focus on. And I think it's such a richness that it's possible for us to use therapy, to have
Yeah.
therapy, and to help it heal us and help us on our path
Yeah.
through life. So it's really, for
Yeah.
me, it's so important.
Yeah, most definitely. Last thing I would say is like it doesn't have to be expensive. There are also digital platforms
Yes,
that can help you with certified therapists, well-trained therapists that you could reach out to, who can help you for the fraction of a cost if you go, sit in live to the practice of a therapist.
definitely.
And talking helps, right? It's also about having someone to talk to. I think if anything, make sure you talk about stuff you go through, because sometimes you just cannot digest it alone. So
Yes,
if you have
absolutely.
no money, then talking about things just helps. And so there might be someone in your surroundings who has a listening ear, who might want to listen to you, but do take the initiative to talk.
Definitely.
uh, Jojanneke, thank you so much. These were your 3 challenges, and I'm very happy you took me on this journey. We're almost at the end of this interview. Before we close off, I would like to ask you 2 questions, and I ask them to all my guests. One is around reading. In your career as a journalist, has there been any article, book, site, whatever it is, that has inspired you? and that you would recommend for others to read as well?
Well, I love to read, and I read a lot, and I'm a big fan. I mostly read female writers, but I am a really, really big fan of Jonathan Franzen.
Mm.
And I read all of his books, and his latest book, Crossroads, is also really amazing. And what has inspired me in his work and his books is the way he describes human beings. It's so real. It's so I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but it touches me every time, and
Mm.
it inspires me to when I work and when I make a documentary series as a journalist, I aspire to show the human behind the politician, or just the human story behind the child prostitute, or the client who pays for the child prostitute, or the pimp, or whatever. I always look for the human story, because every person, whether you're a criminal or whether you're a prostitute, or a big shot in the business industry, you all have a human story. And I think it's so important that we keep on seeing that human side and the human story behind every human being, because that
Yeah.
is what connects us, and that is what is our strength and our forte. And that he inspires me, because when I read his work, it's so profoundly human and real. And I take that with me in my own work. So I would really recommend to
Nice.
read his books. They're very thick, but
Yeah,
they're worth it.
they're very, yeah, they're definitely worth it, and the corrections is unparalleled. I really enjoy the work of Jonathan Franzen as well. I'm currently reading Crossroads,
Mm,
so but yeah, I mean, yeah, I could highly recommend them, and indeed what he does to me is he really shows also a contemporary vision on what it is like to be human today. Not necessarily kind of in the olden age. It's not like a historic perspective, but it's really
yes.
kind of, here's what's happening today, and he just has a knack for it. So yeah,
Yeah.
credit
And
well
and
deserved
and
for Jonathan
although, if
Franzen.
I can mention one more, it's Hannah
Sure,
Gatsby. Do you know her, Hannah Gatsby?
I've
She
heard of the name, but I haven't
Oh,
read
you
anything of
have
her. Yeah,
to watch her
yeah,
immediately. She's a
yeah.
comedian, a lesbian comedian. She has
Yeah.
shows on Netflix, and we have been talking about vulnerability, and about being true to yourself. And she she is a feminist, and she is hilarious, but also very touching and moving. And the human aspect I was just referring to, that Jonathan Franzen writes about so beautifully, she puts it out there in a totally different way, but also so very moving and touching, and so very funny. You pee your pants. So
Okay.
also go and watch her.
Jonathan Franzen and Hannah Gatsby. And then
Yes.
my very last question, Jojanneke. Um, Now let's turn the tables. This is the Jojanneke van den Berge podcast. Who who would you like to have as one of your first guests? Who's on your wish list?
Oh wow, that's a very very good question. Well, you had Edith Eger, huh? You
I did, yeah, yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
yeah. Because I would really, I'm very jealous of you. I would so much want to interview her. She is such an amazing human being, and I loved her book. But you beat me to it. So,
She's
let me.
lovely. She's amazing. Yeah,
Well, then
she's a
can I
whirlwind.
can I can I say can okay? Let's just take Hannah Gatsby out of the last question. I would love to interview Hannah Gatsby.
Okay.
Because she's this Australian lesbian comedian, and her shows are on Netflix, and she's very famous by all over the world. And she's always her shows were always about making fun of the fact that she was a kind of fat lesbian, and she was
Mm.
hurting herself by doing so, but she didn't see it. So she was, thinking, what is my worth in the world? Well, I'm funny, and people can laugh about me because I'm a lesbian and I'm kind of fat. And then she decided not to do so anymore. So in one of her shows, she just, the audience is expecting like the hilarious evening, and then she just flips the coin, and she starts saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. I will not do comedy anymore. I will not laugh at myself anymore. I will not laugh at me because I'm a lesbian. I will not laugh at me because I am fat. And then she starts telling about the atrocity she's been through because of being a lesbian and looking kind of male, and the abuse she encountered. And it's so moving, and it's so totally not what you expected. And she is a real advocate for women and for how they are portrayed in the world, and she does such a great job on it. So I would love to interview her. She's coming to the Netherlands in November. So who knows, Aldo? Maybe I can make it happen.
Hannah, if you're listening, Jojanneke wants to interview you. We can make it happen as well. Jojanneke will be the interviewer, and Hannah could come on the Teach Pitch podcast. Jojanneke, thank you so much for being an absolute whirlwind in journalism. Thank you so much for making such beautiful documentaries around topics that matter. Thank you so much for not being a bystander. And I hope you're going to continue making a lot more beautiful documentaries. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more from you. Jojanneke van den Berge, thank you.
Thank you so much, Aldo. Thanks for having me.
If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.